Bitcoin has actually just displayed a very, very big sign, something that's massively important, and historically it's generally meant that Bitcoin could be looking at rising up by quite a lot. So I want to show you that, but just before we get into it, let's take a look at the Bitcoin chart since the last video, right? Bitcoin, since the last live stream, which those of you who are subscribed will have been able to watch, has tumbled down a little bit lower towards that crucial support area that I've been outlining on this YouTube channel. We've actually tested it now and have potentially successfully found support in it as well, which is starting to look a little bit nice as well. Now, we didn't penetrate it too far, right? So we can definitely end up dropping a little bit lower into this. This whole range to me ends at $40,000, and so we've got, you know, another call it a $2,000 drop until we end up, falling out of this support level. And I think that this whole support level is important. Now, one of the key things I was showing you is the Ichimoku cloud, and you can see that we are literally just on the edge of testing it. This cloud stretches all the way down, even lower, down to about 39.2, and then to about 39.4. So it still is offering support almost completely, perfectly in line with the green box that I've had drawn. And of course, again, those of you who have been watching this channel regularly are going to know a lot about this green box because I haven't shut up about it. This is, in my opinion, the single most important level for Bitcoin on its chart right now, other than, of course, its all-time high. But here we are. You know, this thing right here ended up giving Bitcoin massive rejections in the past, but also massive support rallies, right? Take a look at this. We've triggered some really, really nice support pumps off this $40,000 range, but of course, we found a lot of very, very nasty resistance for Bitcoin as well. And so this is me saying that, like, obviously finding a little bit of resistance here was almost, kind of somewhat expected. We were talking a lot on this channel how Bitcoin wasn't quite able to get above that prior swing high. We didn't really stick in a higher high with a candle body, only with wicks. It's still a pretty good sign. Bitcoin has had a very impressive uptrend here, but just putting it on your radar, of course, this area was resistance, and so we were potentially expecting a little bit of a move to the downside. But now that we've dropped down by a couple $1,000s, I think that we are at the stage where we can comfortably start talking about a little bit of support. It doesn't mean that Bitcoin is going to find support in this range, but what I am saying is that if we do penetrate it even deeper, I would expect, something of a bounce. Whether that bounce ends up being absolutely huge, like some of the moves we've seen in the past, like I showed you over here, we triggered a huge rally up with this bounce right here, which obviously took us from 40,000 all the way up to 66 and 69,000. Or whether we get a much smaller bounce, which actually we don't have any examples of. I guess an example of what that small bounce might look like is right here, where Bitcoin fell down to this area. Again, by the way, those of you who are watching this channel, just even during this time in the market, we were predicting all of this perfectly. It was very, very impressive. So those of you who were staying tuned will have remembered this, where I was talking about how, yeah, a little bit of support at 42 would very much be on the cards, or all the way down to 40. We ended up getting that and rallying up by, this $5,000 move right here, which is absolutely great. And again, that it begs the question now, if we do end up penetrating this area a little bit more, are we going to find a little bit of support to take us just up to 45, but then maybe drop back down? Or are we going to find a lot of support and then rise back up, all the way to 50K and 60K? I don't know. Obviously, it's very hard to say, but what I do know is that a lot of indicators that were previously bearish for Bitcoin have flipped. And there's one big one that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. So if you're excited for it, do me a favor and smash up the likes. It's absolutely huge. It's very, very impressive. And then there's another one that I also want to give you an update on, which was previously bearish, now not so bearish. And these are things which you can't really be fooled by the way. Like, this analysis is somewhat objective. It's not really very objective subjective in my opinion, but there are some elements of it that are, quite open to interpretation, like this one I'm about to talk about right now. What I'm going to show you later on, not subjective, very, very clear. So here we go. This daily EMA ribbon also offering Bitcoin a little bit of potential support right here, just showing us that we were able to climb all the way above this heavy momentum resistance and are now looking to potentially flip it and turn it into support. Of course, on the 4-hour time frame, we've already had this support. We've now actually just dipped below it a little bit, where we're right back in it, so we can potentially find a little bit of support from this ribbon. I'm not too concerned about it because it is quite a short-term indicator, even on the 4-hour time frame. And so for now, what I am looking at is just seeing if this, potential double top that we've ended up setting does take us a little bit lower, deeper into the support zone. Now, here's the thing. If this support zone fails, I do see another support zone pretty much directly below it at 39, but we're going to have quite a problem here. You see, if Bitcoin ends up falling through this 40K support zone, finding support at 39 and bouncing up, we're now going to be encountering the same level as resistance. And if we end up getting a rejection here, that's going to put us back into a new downtrend where we're setting lower highs and lower lows within the trend, right? So that would potentially be very, very damaging. This is something that I do want to keep on your radar, because even though we didn't really find much resistance last time, we did find resistance, but it didn't send the price down. It just paused the trend temporarily, which is technically still another form of a correction. So we did find resistance, just not very much. It doesn't mean that we won't find resistance next time if we end up coming back to this level and testing it again as potential resistance. I just want you guys to be aware of that, because obviously right now, we look at things like the fear and greed index, and people aren't really in line with reality right now. I mean, yes, we're dipping back into fear a little bit, but for the most part, there's quite a lot of positivity that's made its way back into the market, and I've shown you a lot of numbers that confirm this, because obviously the fear and greed index isn't really, like, it's hard to measure sentiment, right? But there are tools. This is one that, in my opinion, summarizes a lot of them very well, but there's others that are much clearer. And I've shown you how people are just generally, retail traders especially, people like you and I, generally a lot more positive about the market right now, which is not a good thing in a bear market, right? I'm not saying we're still in a bear market. You know, we have potentially, depending on how you view this, set in a new higher high, which literally confirms that we're no longer in a downtrend in and of itself. But of course, you know, these things, they don't have to hit all the time. These are just general rules, and, you know, rules could be broken a lot, especially, ladies and gents, by Bitcoin. So here's the thing, like I said, this area potentially acting as a little bit of support for Bitcoin. But if we do end up losing it, I would be concerned about it turning into resistance. If it does turn into resistance, and broadly speaking, if we drop below this level, I am going to be looking at Bitcoin bears targeting the low $30,000 range, maybe setting a double bottom, maybe even down to 30K, 31, 32. And the reason I'm saying that is that, you know, right now we have a fair bit of positivity, but this is with quite extreme emotional rubber banding, right? Take a look at this. I mean, from February 4 to February 9, which is a 5-day period, the reading on our fear and greed index jumped by nearly triple. It went from 20 to 54. That's nearly a 3 times increase within 5 days. I think that's really important to keep in mind, because it's showing you, with numbers again, just how do I say, elastic or more so volatile sentiment is in this market. It's another way of me saying that people learn to love Bitcoin very quickly, but they also hate Bitcoin very quickly. It doesn't take a lot to make people realize all the reasons it's ugly again. One of the best analogies I've ever given you guys for this on this YouTube channel, which I made way back, is, you know, when you're going through a breakup with somebody and it's absolutely terrible, you know, like when you're in love with that person, it's going to be very easy to see all the positives. But when shit gets bad, they're just the fucking scum of the planet to some people, the devil, and it's just very easy to see all of the flaws. This is how Bitcoin traders are. They fall deeply in love and passionate with Bitcoin. Just dropping truth bombs here, ladies and gents. The fact that you may or may not agree with this doesn't change the facts. People fall deeply in love with Bitcoin as an asset because they have so much hope and so much desperation across the board. And then, naturally, because Bitcoin doesn't always fulfill those desires, they start hating it, and they start selling it, and they start panicking. So that can set in really quickly if we lose this support, in my opinion. I think the whole market knows that the 40K level is quite important. And if it does set in, then again, that could give the bears a chance to drive the market much lower. This is not the first and last time that Bitcoin is going to pump up by 30-40% after a disgusting drop, a hideous downtrend, and then continue the downtrend, right? One of the key things that I really want you guys to just keep staying aware of, which I've been warning about in nearly every video here, is that we've had a very extreme downtrend. So to now have an extreme reversal isn't necessarily like good enough. Let me articulate that a little bit better. Because we had such a strong, aggressive, relentless downtrend with no real relief whatsoever, and this is really important, because we've had, like, right here, 1, 2, 3, 4 consecutive real big drops in the market, right? With no real relief. The best relief we got was right here. It was plus 14%. It's barely anything. This right here is like plus 40%. So it's a big difference. With no real relief, we've had 4 consecutive big dips in the market, and it took us like 3 bloody months, right? So a lot of pain. Like, no shit. Like, even if the market is still in a downtrend, no shit, we're getting an extreme rally to the upside right now. it can still very much be a relief rally, even if we end up trading all the way up to 50k, just because, purely because, the downtrend has been so extreme, right? Again, I mean, it's like you've just lost $10 million and you find $1 million on the street. Yeah, it's a good sign, but you're nowhere near recovering the pain that's been done. Or even a better analogy would be losing a parent, but you just made $1 million just in one day. Like, the $1 million is nice, you haven't solved the problem though. And this is the same. It's not. It's very different. That was quite insensitive. I'm sorry for that, but this is similar in the point where, like, there's a lot of damage that's been done, and this isn't necessarily repairing that. I want you guys to stay aware of that. We can have very extreme reactions, and it doesn't mean the market is good. Again, I want to show you this with numbers so that you can see that I'm not making this shit up. This is real. Right here, Bitcoin was also in a very aggressive downtrend, and you can see that it ended up dropping down to $29,000 on this chart, and it rallied from 29 all the way up to 43, which is a very similar move to what we're in right now. This was also a plus 42% move to the upside. It was a very extreme reaction to a very extreme downtrend, but it didn't mean that the market was staying bullish. This was just an extreme temporary reaction. Now, of course, the good news that we have right now, and I'm going to get into that chart as well that I wanted to show you in just a moment, which ties into this very closely, is that Bitcoin has actually had a little bit of a sustained move here. This is different to what I just showed you, because whereas previously Bitcoin took, let's say, 2 days to form that 42% pump, here we've taken 17 days to form a 39% pump. So we've done it a lot slower, and slow moves are sustainable moves. So that's why I'm so keen on seeing this area turning into support. That's why I think it has a real chance of turning into support, and that's why my short-term analysis remains bullish for Bitcoin. With a lot of caution, I'm definitely not throwing caution to the wind. It stays bullish. But here's the thing that I think is really exciting, right? Take a look at this chart right here. Let me break down for you what this chart is, just give you a quick read of it. This is the 30-day change of the supply held in exchange wallets, and basically what this is showing us is when the histogram is red, money is being moved off exchanges. You can see the net position change for all exchanges drops here by 98,000 Bitcoin, which, first of all, that's a fucking lot of money. It's hard to get your head around so much money. But second of all, what you can also generally see is, well, actually, before we even get to that, the green histogram here represents money being moved onto exchanges. So this is very interesting because you can see that generally, not all the time, but generally, when a lot of money moves onto exchanges, here's the thing, right? I think a lot of people maybe are new to the market and you don't even know this. So let me break this down for you. When people move, this is the beauty of Bitcoin, right? Like, we don't have this data with, mainstream financial markets, with stock markets, with Forex, with whatever, with maybe, I mean, you can't really do this with real estate either. But with Bitcoin, it's very easy because we can literally see where funds are being moved to. And we can see the exact Bitcoin wallets of exchanges. They're known, they're public. This is the point of Bitcoin. And so, if money is being moved onto an exchange, if Bitcoin is being moved onto an exchange, it's like moving your gold into wherever you sell gold. It's like moving your car into a dealership, right? It's just like you're generally doing it with an intention to liquidate it. However, if a car gets driven off a dealership, you're generally driving it off the dealership with an intention to keep it, at least for a while. It's not the best analogy in the world, but you kind of get the point, right? When Bitcoin is on the marketplace, i.e. on the exchange, the implication is that it's going to be traded or exchanged or traded or sold or whatever. If it's taken off an exchange, potentially into a hardware wallet or whatever the case may be, the implication is that it's going to be held and potentially held tightly. So again, we move back to the chart and we can see quite clearly. Let's take a look at this. With the first green histogram, Bitcoin being moved onto an exchange. This happens when Bitcoin moves up from $9,000 to a high right here of $12,000. A lot of Bitcoins moved onto exchanges at this point, and look at what follows. A nice little dump. But before and during the dump, and then even afterwards, a lot of money gets moved off exchanges as people are buying the shit out of Bitcoin, absolutely relentlessly, getting very excited for Bitcoin right here as Bitcoin travels from $12,000 all the way up to 20k. Again, those of you who are watching the channel back here, we were I think 100% right about the price action again right there. It was very, very impressive. So just make sure you are subscribed if you like this kind of content, because we've been very consistent in this market for years. VIP as well. If you want to take a look at what's going on inside, then follow these steps on screen. I've also been a fairly, I would like to say, consistent trader over the years. Definitely not the best, but absolutely by far, very, very far not the worst. I keep my capital very safe, and I'm quite happy with what I've been able to do there, generally outperforming the markets, and that to me is obviously quite a good sign, and not even by a little bit, outperforming the market by a lot, if you take a look at what the markets really have been doing. So if you do want to jump inside of VIP and see how I've been able to pull that off, or just get a little bit more information about it, then again, the steps are on screen right here. But let's take us back to this chart. What you can see is that generally when the Bitcoin is being moved off exchanges, we are getting ready for a little bit of a rip up, or the rip up is happening while the Bitcoin is being moved off exchanges. But when we see a really big buildup of money entering exchanges again, it actually happens right here as panic is really building up. And this generally happens before and during big drops in the market. So again, right here, this green histogram happened before the big, I mean, it wasn't a big drop, but it was from, you know, about $12,000 to about $10,000. So it was, you know, it's about 20%. It was fairly large. And then over here, this one was very big. We start seeing a lot of money being moved onto exchanges, you know, kind of beginning around 49,000 all the way up to about 56, and it peaks when Bitcoin reaches a price of 40,000. But of course, this is now very low to the overall bottom that Bitcoin set right here. It's just interesting how a lot of money moved onto exchanges at this very same time. But take a look at what happens afterwards. I can't make this up. We start seeing supply being moved off exchanges, and Bitcoin starts rocketing up. There's just less Bitcoins available to be liquidated quickly, and so, I mean, it's not because of that, but I'm sorry, how do I say this? At the same time as that, we also see Bitcoin beginning to gearing up to rally up and set some new highs for the trend. Again, right here, we see a lot of Bitcoins being moved off exchanges while Bitcoin is actively setting highs. There's a brief little bit of fear here where people move their Bitcoin onto exchanges, but it goes away very quickly. And again, a lot of Bitcoin being moved off exchanges and potentially into longer term storage so that, you know, people don't want to sell until the highs at 60K, and people start moving their Bitcoin right back to exchanges, potentially getting ready to liquidate. And you know, broadly speaking, this whole time Bitcoins have been moved off into longer term storage. We saw a few key spikes right here just before the big crash into the 33K range, but right now we are firmly seeing similar action right now, where a lot of Bitcoins are actually being moved off exchanges again, as Bitcoin is rallying up right now within this short-term trend. So that is definitely a pretty cool sign to see, in my opinion, indicating that you know, people are really, you know, almost putting their money where their mouth is. If they're bullish, putting it in longer term storage. And another thing that I thought was really interesting, it's not actually super clear, but remember how I was talking about how you know, retail was buying a lot of Bitcoin during this move, and so, you know, this could end up being a trap. It absolutely could still be the very same trap, and you know why if you've heard the past 10 minutes of this video where I've been talking about how, you know, the downtrend was very extreme. So I don't want to repeat that, but you know, a lot of retail, you know, with small address balances, these are addresses that have a balance of, you know, 0.01 BTC or more. I know for some people this is, you know, a fairly large amount, but let's be honest, broadly speaking, in the financial world, it's basically nothing. You know, especially when we compare it to 10,000 Bitcoins on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. You know, we do have a situation here where retail was quite happy to be buying, and you know, I mean, it's interesting to watch this. But one of the things that I was talking about being concerning is that the larger addresses, they really started to sell their Bitcoin when this drop happened, potentially, or I mean, the addresses with a balance of more than 1,000 Bitcoins, for example, it actually dropped, and I'll show you why in just a second. I don't want to show you yet, but you know, there are less addresses with 1,000 Bitcoin or more, and the general implication there is Bitcoin is being, you know, sent elsewhere to potentially be sold. Now that is really important, because, you know, if that's happening, then, you know, what do the big guys know that we don't? You know what I mean? If they're trying to sell their Bitcoin, what does that mean? But if we take a look at the addresses now with more than 1,000 Bitcoins, you can actually see a little bit of a move up. It's nothing crazy. I just want to be very clear. It's only a move up of 9 more addresses. If I'm reading this right, yeah, only 9 more addresses with 1,000 Bitcoin or more. So, I mean, that could be just one exchange, right? I mean, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are getting more bullish and holding more Bitcoin, broadly speaking, because we're not actually seeing this repeating with other large balances. Like the 100 Bitcoin addresses still quite low compared to where it was before. Again, indicating that large holders really did start offloading their Bitcoins around this price level. It doesn't mean they're always right, by the way. We saw another pretty big dip right here and over here, and it wasn't necessarily the right decision, but we did see quite a large dip for Bitcoin over here, and it actually did coincide very nicely with the drop that followed. So I just want to point these things out to you. Again, I'm trying to stay very nuanced here. I'm trying to stay relatively neutral. This is obviously quite important. A lot of people get excited and start drawing potentially quite dangerous conclusions, but the fact is, yeah, there are still less addresses with very, very large balances compared to what we saw before, which can potentially, but not necessarily, be a bearish sign. But anyway, I wanted to put it on your radar. The key thing that I find quite interesting is, like I showed you, the exchange net position change, which is potentially showing us right now that, you know, quite a few people compared to before are willing to keep their Bitcoin in longer term storage right now because they don't want to sell it, which of course inherently means that if we bring it back to the chart and my beautiful face, what it inherently means is that supply, which was previously, let's say, over here, just by virtue of not being on exchanges, generally means that supply is going to be dropping while demand might be staying the same, or, you know, maybe even increasing, right? So that supply and demand equation, I think, is very important, and it does potentially have quite a large implication on the chart. And like I said, nobody is talking about this. Nobody is even looking at this stuff right now, and it could turn out to be very, very bullish for Bitcoin. Because here's the thing, is last time Bitcoin had something like this happen to it in a real meaningful way, which I think was around over here, you know, Bitcoin went from a low of, you know, pretty much where it was just a few days ago at 40k, 41k, up to a high of 69k. That was a $38,000 pump or something ridiculous like that. So if we're seeing something similar happen right now, again, we could be looking at rising back up to those all-time highs. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. It's quite irresponsible for me to be saying stuff like that, but I'm just putting it on your radar. I'm just showing you that these are factors that are at play in the market right now. This short-term chart is very strong, in my opinion, at the moment, because it's seen a nice uptrend with a good amount of control. Like I said, it didn't spike up in one day. It took 17 days. It took 2.5 weeks, which is, you know, slow enough for Bitcoin in a situation like this. And that's why I am looking at it potentially capturing a little bit of support in the short term and then maybe moving higher. Now, again, how high we go, I don't know. Whether we top out at 45k, if we end up bouncing at all, maybe we just fall through the floor. But, you know, if we top out at 45k, or maybe, you know, a little bit higher at the next resistance zone, which is 48, or maybe at the next real big resistance zone, which is 51 to 53, I don't know. I don't have those answers. I'm just going to evaluate it when and if the time comes, because you know, one of the key things I think a lot of people miss, and I want to drop this little nugget of wisdom. Hopefully you guys do appreciate it. And again, if you guys are finding these videos useful, do me a massive favor and just smash up the likes if you feel like doing so, of course, and subscribe as well if you haven't done so already. But one of the key things that I want to talk to you guys about, which I think a lot of people don't consider, is that you know, you're making one conclusion to say Bitcoin can find support here and bounce up, but then you're making a total an entirely separate and second conclusion to say that Bitcoin can bounce up and top out at 45, and you're making a totally different conclusion saying Bitcoin can bounce up and top out at 48, and a totally different one to say Bitcoin can bounce up and top out at 52. And the reason I'm saying this is that there is a set probability, and we don't know it. If you had the codes to the matrix, you would know, but there is a certain probability that Bitcoin is going to find support at this support level. And then there's a certain probability we're going to rise up to 44. And then there's a certain probability we're going to break it and rise up to 48. And then there's a certain probability that we're going to break 48 and rise up to 52. And what you're doing, if you're making the conclusion that Bitcoin can get all the way up here, is you're essentially trying to say, what is the overall likelihood of each of these probabilities playing out the way you think they will? The overall probability of a sequence of particular events happening is always very low. The best way I can give you an analogy for this is if you flip a coin and you try and say that the coin is going to flip heads, you have a 50% chance of being right. But if you say it's going to flip heads twice, you have a 25% chance of being right. And if you say it's going to flip heads 3 times, like twice in a row, if you say it's going to flip heads 3 times in a row, now your chance is 12.5%. If you say it's going to flip heads 4 times in a row, now your chance is 6.75%, and so on and so forth. Your overall probability of being right about your main conclusion is always lower the more variables you have that enter the mix. And that, ladies and gents, to round off the video, is exactly why my style is the way it is right now. This is the reason that I'm so accurate on the 𝗧𝗢𝗢𝗥𝗙𝗟 YouTube channel. I don't try and step ahead. I'll give you guys the analysis anyway, because look, I'm being a little bit like, this is not how I actually think. This is a little bit extreme. It is still fair to say that this is the real resistance for Bitcoin, in my opinion, right? So I don't want to like discredit that kind of analysis at all. I still think it's very valid, and I think it must be done as part of a healthy package of analysis. But I've also come to the conclusion, after my nearly 5 years in this market now and 4 years of being what I would consider to be competent, that the only reasonable way that you can carry out analysis with a high probability of consistently being correct is if you only look at the immediate next move. And what that also means is that there's potentially a lot of trading opportunities for me in the market. Now, I don't trade super frequently. I want to make this very clear. I'm not a day trader or anything like this. I've been saying this for a long time, but I am still someone who I'd consider it to be fairly regular trading, especially considering the volatility in these markets. And if you do want to jump inside of VIP and see how I'm pulling off what I pull off, the last trade I made didn't actually work out very well, by the way. It was a 20% loss, but on a very small bit of my capital. And I told VIP members that my last trade was a very high risk trade for me. Didn't work out, but that's totally fine. If you want to see how I'm going to be navigating the markets, navigating my losses, right? You're going to fucking lose money. It's going to happen. How do you pick yourself up and march onwards? Do you march onwards, or do you just sit there crying about it? These are very important things. And when you're watching a trader who you deem to be good at the market, obviously a lot of VIP members think that's the case for me. It doesn't necessarily mean I am. But, if you are watching someone who you admire as a trader, and you're seeing them navigate the same pitfalls that you're in, seeing them navigate the same challenges that you're in, it can really help you elevate yourself as a trader. And so if you want to be able to do that with myself and my team, the way to join VIP, again, is by following these steps on screen right here. If you want to use Bybit, which is the only exchange that I've been trading on pretty much for years now, you can check it out by using the link in the description down below, and you're going to get some free cash when you sign up to Bybit and make your first deposit. So definitely do check that out. I hope you have enjoyed this one. You know what to do if you have. Hit up the likes, subscribe, tick the bell, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.